Picture this. It's 1973. The whole country is basically nursing a hangover from the Apollo moon landings. That party is over, NASA's budget is getting slashed, nobody's sure what they're supposed to do next, and to top it all off, there's a massive energy crisis gripping the world. So, to survive, NASA has to pull off the sale of a lifetime. They have to convince a very skeptical America to fund its next giant leap, a reusable space plane called the Space Shuttle. And wow, the people they had to convince, they were not messing around. This quote from Congressman Louis Frey Jr. pretty much says it all. This was the mood in Congress. The days of, let's go to space just because it's cool, were completely over. They wanted to know, point blank, what's in it for us? What's the return on this massive investment? You know, to really get the pressure NASA was under, you have to understand the vibe of the country back then. That post-Apollo hangover was real. The thrill was gone, and people were focused on problems right here on Earth. The economy, social unrest, and that energy crisis that was dominating every single headline. I mean, just look at the difference a few years makes. 1969 was pure national triumph. We did it. But by 73, that feeling had totally evaporated. In those same hearings, Apollo was called a gold-plated crash program. Ouch. The new buzzword was practicality. NASA had to prove it wasn't just a relic of the good times, but a vital tool for a troubled present. And this quote from Congressman Larry Wynn Jr. just nails it. He's not asking about Mars or distant galaxies. He's basically saying, look, that's all great, but can you guys help us keep the lights on back home? The entire conversation had shifted from what was possible out there in space to what was useful down here on Earth. And you know, behind all these high-level budget debates, there was a really painful human story. One of the contractors talked about the sad traumas of having to lay off 20,000 people after Apollo wrapped up. The space race wasn't just a dream, it was a massive employer, and now the future of that entire industry felt like it was hanging by a thread. So NASA is in a corner. They're facing all this pressure. What's their answer? Well, their answer was a vehicle that promised to completely change our relationship with space forever. And here it is. This was the vision. I mean, look at it. This wasn't another one-shot rocket you just throw away. This was a reusable space plane. The shuttle was pitched as this reliable, economical space truck that would make getting to orbit almost as routine as catching a flight, opening up space for business. The pitch was basically that this thing was a Swiss Army knife for orbit. It could deploy satellites for way cheaper. It could even go up and grab broken satellites to fix them, saving millions. One guy literally said it would carry a lab bench into orbit for scientists. But the real home run, the biggest promise of all, was creating a brand new industry, manufacturing things in zero gravity. But here's the kicker. The biggest challenge wasn't the rocket science. No way. It was money. It was convincing a Congress that was still feeling the sting from the massive price tag of Apollo that this time, NASA and its partners could actually stick to a budget. So how did they do that? How did they try to prove that they had a totally new, much tighter grip on the purse strings? Let's take a look. They didn't just show up with cool drawings. They showed up with spreadsheets. This is a real management chart that Rockwell International presented to Congress. They came armed with all this data to show exactly how they'd track every single dollar and every hour. This wasn't just about building a spaceship. It was about building confidence. And man, were they confident. When they were asked how long it would take to spot a problem, a cost overrun, anything, a Rockwell exec promised their new system could flag it in less than a week. They were selling a whole new way of managing these giant projects. They were selling control. Okay, so once they tried to calm everyone down about the money, the pitch pivoted to the really revolutionary stuff. This wasn't just about getting to space anymore. It was about what we could make up there that would change life down here. And this right here was the core of it. The ultimate reason to build the shuttle was to bring the incredible benefits of space manufacturing back down to Earth. The whole idea was to use the perfect vacuum and zero gravity of space as a kind of ultimate factory floor. And the products they were promising were just astonishing. We're talking about perfect crystals that could revolutionize electronics, flawless ball bearings, new metal alloys with unbelievable strength. They even talked about creating new life-saving vaccines and medicines that were physically impossible to make with Earth's gravity. This was the direct answer to that question, what's in it for us? But as incredible as all that sounded, NASA's allies had one last card to play. And this idea was so big, so audacious, it sounded like pure science fiction. and it was aimed squarely at solving the biggest crisis of the day. This was the ultimate question, right? Could this incredible machine, designed to conquer the final frontier, also solve our most urgent problem right here on Earth? The answer they proposed was, well, absolutely breathtaking. They called it the Power Relay Satellite, or PRS. The concept was dreamed up by a Rockwell scientific advisor named Dr. Kraft Ericke. And honestly, the simplest way to think about it is like a giant mirror in space, but for energy. So here's how the grand plan was supposed to work. First, you build massive power plants somewhere remote, like a huge solar farm in the Sahara or a nuclear plant in the Arctic. Then, you convert all that power into a focused microwave beam. You shoot that beam up to the satellite in orbit, and then the satellite catches that beam and reflects it back down with pinpoint accuracy to a city that needs the power. New York, London, Tokyo, anywhere. And this drawing just shows you the sheer scale of what they were thinking. This wasn't some small-time experiment. This was a blueprint for a truly global wireless power grid. You could have power plants in Canada beaming energy down to the East Coast, or solar farms in South America powering the whole continent. And as Dr. Eric himself put it, this system uncouples power generation from consumption. What that really means is, all of a sudden, geography doesn't matter anymore. You could tap into the most powerful energy sources on the planet, no matter how remote they were, and send that power wherever you wanted. So there you have it. That was the ultimate sales pitch. Fund the space shuttle. And you're not just funding space exploration. You're funding a whole new industrial revolution with miracle materials and medicines. And you're funding a permanent solution to the energy crisis. You're funding energy independence. It was an incredible promise. A reusable space truck, factories floating in orbit, and a global power grid run by satellites. I mean, it was an absolutely mind-blowing vision that they sold to a very skeptical nation at a really pivotal moment in history. Which leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? How do the grand promises of 1973 measure up against the complicated reality we live in today?